Okay, just a little bit more clicking on this microphone, and then I'm hoping it's going to stop for you. And I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint. And while I do that, I've got to tell this joke. One more joke. Sorry. I tell these jokes when my band plays out, and we normally play like coffee houses and things. And this will be the first time I can tell this joke, and people will actually understand it. So I got to take advantage of it. E to the X and the number 7 were walking down the street, and they saw coming, the mega villain of the world, the derivative. And so the derivative is walking down, and 7 goes, I got to get out of here. He's going to turn me into nothing. I'm going to goner. And so 7 runs away, and E to the X just nonchalantly walks up and says, I'm not afraid of you. You can't hurt me. And the derivative says, that's what you think. I'm partial with respect to Y. Okay, well. How those jokes all flat, I guess, all over the place. So, I'm here today to, normally what I like to do when I talk is I try and give some practical information, some things that you can immediately do to take into your classroom and change some things. I'm doing something a little bit different here at this talk. I'm doing more of a call to arms, I guess. I'm hoping to spur change because I think that there is a future that's worth fighting for, and I think it's quickly slipping out of our grasp. If you take a look at what education environment looks like today, we've heard it described as a toxic testing environment, and I would say that the whole teaching environment is pretty toxic. We have nonsensical government requirements that are laid on us from people who actually don't know anything about being in the classroom. We have no funding to even carry out these requirements. We have less time to accomplish more learning, and we have a system that blames the teachers. Okay? And I want to stress to you, I am a teacher. I'm first and foremost in the classroom working with my kids too. I'm in the trenches with you. And we're catching the blame when there's enough to spread around. Right? And the worst part about this whole thing for me is that we, the educators, I think, lack the power to enact change. Even when we want to change things, we want things to be better for our students, we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to go about it. And so it ends up being a complaining session and nothing more. And I don't think that's productive because I think we actually can change things. I think we can, but we got to fight for it. And it's going to take things that, like microphones buzzing, even when you're standing still. Okay, easy. Okay, I guess I'll hold this. It's gonna take a version of fighting that maybe we're not used to. I've always been a fantasy type of person, Lord of the Rings, things like that. If there were a giant dragon standing here, you would hand me a sword, I would have no problem putting my life on the line and running straight at that dragon and trying my darndest to slay it. But when there's nothing physical to go after an attack, when it takes something more intellectual, for me, I know I tend to back down. And I know that even this past year, as I've tried to back down myself from being an activist a little bit, just to take some time off, it's hard work. And I tend to err on the side of being lazy myself. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, maybe we're in that boat. But I think if we're willing to go beyond that, then we can get a future that might look like this. What if we got rid of high-stakes testing? And what if assessment actually worked in classrooms? What if we had curriculum that was available to every student, regardless of their socioeconomic background, regardless of how much you have to pay testing or textbook companies who don't even make good textbooks in the first place, and then charge yearly subscription fees? What if we gave students the chance to actually master learning instead of demanding a one-size-fits-all, here's the standard? And I know that when I've said this in the past, I've caught some flack, but, oh well, I'm going to say it again. So let me take a look at what's going on right now. With the environment that we live in, with high-stakes testing in particular, high-stakes testing has got to go. I don't know how familiar you are with PARC, but we start in less than a week and a half. And we still can't get our students to even show up in the system, despite working with Pearson for 6 weeks on it. Okay? But that's not the issue. That's an implementation issue that can be fixed, right? I would expect rocky implementation issues. So give PARC some grace on those sort of things. But there is a lack of reliability. Okay? We're talking about a single test score versus a preponderance of data. And instead, I've always said you need about 10 questions to be able to assess mastery on a single skill. right, to get that reliability over a period of time. And while I think PARC has done a good job with, of course I haven't seen it in action, but we're trying to develop AI that can grade tests to help improve the reliability across graders, because if we've only got the computer grading it, then it ought to be reliable within itself, ideally. Okay, so I think there's been some good work done there, but we're still not seeing the reliability across time and seeing those multiple points of data. We have some validity issues with the PARC testing. In some cases, we are looking at something that is computationally difficult rather than actually assessing the standard. So here's a question that's nearly straight from the PARC sample questions. And I would submit to you that if the problem looked more like that, the students would have a better chance of doing it. And we're still assessing solving equations with variables on both sides using the distributive property, but we've eliminated fractions and integers, which we know are immediate no-goes for students, right? The computational nature. So what has happened is we've increased the complexity of the problem without going deeper into web depths of knowledge or balloons or whatever version you want to use of how we're looking at assessing deeper learning. It's not. It's just more difficult. And that destroys, in my mind, the validity of the test question. We're not actually assessing what the standard says. Also, at this point, and again, this can be fixed, but we're right now still assessing whether or not students know the test interface rather than knowing the actual content, because we've had trouble getting access to the testing interface. Okay? Just some little things. For example, if you pull up the basic equation editor right there, you've got widely x as your button for exponents on the equation editor, but on the scientific calculator, which the same company built both, it's a different button. Yeah, like, why would we do things like that? These things don't make sense. This is the testing interface interfering with getting at the actual knowledge of the student. Or this question, where students are asked to click one checkbox within a row, okay, only one within a row, and then you can check all of them, by the way. It doesn't bring you down to just one. You can check all of them. And then the very next question is one that you have to check one in each column, switching between the rows and the columns. Again, this is the testing interface interfering with getting at what the students actually know. Now, little things like this, these are little things, okay? But those can be fixed. But the overall picture of what I see is no reliability and validity. And in fact, according to a January 22nd article in the Washington Post, the American Statistical Association says that these high-stakes tests are not reliable or valid either. In fact, the whole thing seems to go against backwards design. Aren't we told that we're supposed to move ahead with the end in mind? But you're getting ready, and maybe you already have, signed all of your security agreements to say you won't even look at the test? We don't even know where we're going. What happens if you accidentally look at the screen? You know, you have to report yourself. Oh my goodness, I looked, it's hideous. You know, it doesn't make sense the way we're going about this. We don't have validity or reliability. And it doesn't assess deeper learning because of some of these issues. In fact, Stanford University professor Linda Darling-Hammond was a senior research advisor for the Smarter Balance Association. She put together this chart. So she works for these next-gen test companies. And as you can see, the Smarter Balance and PARC both sit basically right where ISAT was, in the same category as ISAT. We haven't really progressed forward as the claim was going to be. So we replaced one thing with something else that was of the same nature that works not as well. Okay? Again, it's kind of that, if you do the same thing over and over again, why would you expect different results? This was followed up in 2013. This was followed up in 2013 by the Gordon Commission on the Future of Assessment and Education. What they did is they went out, they tried to assess assessment. Here's what they said. The assessments that we will need in the future do not yet exist. The progress made by the PARC and Smarter Balance Consortia in assessment development, while significant, will be far from what is ultimately needed for either accountability or classroom instructional improvement purposes. This is not a criticism of the consortia per se, but a realistic appraisal of the design constraints and timelines imposed upon their work from the outset. While America certainly can profit from the consortia's work, the U.S. Department of Education, in cooperation with a bunch of other people they list, should commit to a 10-year research and development effort to strengthen the capacity of the U.S. assessment enterprise. In other words, we're not there. They're saying research and develop first, then implement. I think we did that backwards. We implemented, And then we decided to develop what we were going to implement, right? But unfortunately, we live in an environment where everybody is too impatient. We want results right now. We're not willing to wait 10 years. We're not willing to wait 15 years because the next election is only 4 years away. And so we want results right now. And I'm saying we have to be challenging people and say, no, take the time to do what's best. And if it's not working, then let's not do it and let's make it work. So implementing it blindly. Also, we know that these high-stakes testing are taking away from instructional time. I don't know, there were just so many articles about kindergartners losing recess that I didn't even pull a single article because there were so many of them. Social studies and science time was already cut in half when RTI laws came down, and now it's cut again with high-stakes testing. We're no longer actually teaching the whole child. And I don't know that maybe we ever were, but we need to be. In fact, I think Jerry just sent out an article last week that said Florida had 154 days out of 180 that were testing that had to do with state tests somehow. Maybe too much. Maybe. Okay? Luckily in Illinois we're not quite that bad. Okay? And it does take time away to teach the interface. Hopefully that's a one-time shot. Again, that's fixable, right? Any new system, you're going to need time to get used to the new system. We would expect that. That's okay, but we're losing time right now to do it. And also, there's even more days of actual testing, right? So we've increased from 3 days ISAT testing, so now I'm doing 5 days of PARC testing. It's disrupting our schedule for the whole day starting March 2nd for us, and then of course we've got 4 more days in the spring. So we're losing instructional time. And beyond this, what is even the purpose? Why are we even doing this? I don't think people even agree on that. I don't know if the politicians agree, other than, well, it got written in this one law this one time, so I guess we better do it. Because is it summative? Is it meant to be accountability? Because I think that was the main purpose of No Child Left Behind, was to hold schools accountable. And whether or not it was the purpose to punish schools, I think that's basically what's happening. So we haven't met those test scores. Is it summative to be able to compare across states? That would be great if we could compare across states. However, at this point, there's about 18% of the nation taking PARC and about 25% taking Smarter Balance as far as student population goes. So we're not even going to be able to compare apples to apples, even with this. Because every state is, in my mind, wrongly crying, well, our state needs our own test. Really? Does Illinois, the quadratic formula work differently in Illinois than it does in Florida? Did I miss a meeting? Because, I don't see why we can't build something that would work across the nation. Is the purpose of high-stakes testing formative, to be able to help students? I think that's what it should be. I think that's where we can go. I think that's what national testing could do. It could help people instead of hurting them. And I know that there's a big push about closing the achievement gap. That's one of the reasons why we did this. In fact, one of the Common Core authors was recently just called out because he said the reason he wrote Common Core was because of white privilege. And people jumped all over him because of it. And I understand that there is an achievement gap. And I do agree that we need to work towards narrowing that gap. But let's be honest, it's never going to be closed. There are going to be students who are left behind. There are going to be students who don't understand the quadratic formula. And furthermore, it's quite all right. I have an autistic brother who, when he was in high school, his job was to try and figure out how to pay for a meal at McDonald's. Do you think I want him working on the quadratic formula in high school? No. Does he need it? No. There is no one-size-fits-all, and there shouldn't be. We're forcing these kids into cookie-cutter molds that they were never designed to be in. And the testing makes it worse. So, notice that none of these issues are actually about the implementation. Because people said, well, it's just the implementation of Common Core and PARC that have been bad. No, it's not. This is not an implementation issue. This is definition, philosophy issue. But we can fix it, right? What we need is well-designed national testing that will provide continual actionable data for all stakeholders. So imagine this. What if national testing were actually part of your everyday classroom routine? So maybe we do have some sort of state testing 154 to 180 days. But what if it was just a quick 5-minute bell ringer or something like that? What if it was part of what you actually do on an everyday basis in your classroom? Because then you could use it to help the students. You could use it to push them further ahead. And it would also have some consistency across the board, right? Whereas the way things stand right now is that everybody's doing something different. So the primary purpose would be for students, and the secondary purpose would be that accountability piece. But remember, this will still take 10 years of research and development before we implement. So this is 15, 20 years away. Okay? So what do? Contact your administration, contact your local politicians to get rid of this. Give specific facts, ask for research and development, insist on transparency and teacher input. Teachers need to have a voice in this. And demand the elimination of the high stakes associated with current tests. But what I'm not asking you to do is get rid of PARC. I want to be clear about that. I'm not asking you to just throw it out. I'm asking you to fix it, okay, and make it worthwhile. Because I think if we throw it out, then we're going to end up with something worse than we were in the first place. We're going to be scrambling like Indiana was when they got rid of Common Core. So what they did, they voted out Common Core as a Republican stunt to get back at the Democrats, and then they put in something that was basically Common Core, except they changed like 3 words. What good did that do? Nothing. Okay? It's a political move. We need to do things that actually work for students. And I am going to warn you, it's hard to have a voice. They're doing the No Child Left Behind rewrite, and of course the window for you to provide input into that is already closed. They had it open for what, 4 weeks? 3 weeks or something like that. Of course they hush, nobody really knew that it was out there. Okay? So you're going to have to contact people and raise a ruckus with the politicians, with ROEs. And I'm telling you, there's going to be some fear-mongering that's going to happen. In Arizona, a teacher, according to an article December 2nd in the Washington Post, Brad McQueen was writing the Zella test. It was for Common Core, the ELA. And he was doing a good job, apparently. But he went on a radio station and spoke out against Common Core. And then the next day, they kicked him off the committee. Because they said, oh, you don't like Common Core, you're gone. He said, well, was I doing good work for you? Well, yeah, but you don't agree with Common Core, you're out here. And he's now suing the state of Arizona. So we're getting to the point where this political fear of dissent, instead of the diversity helping the things, we're being afraid of that and pushing it aside. So I'm going to ask you to fight past that. And if we could be honest with ourselves, isn't some of this testing issue our fault? Think about where our classroom assessments are and how we assess things in our own rooms. If we had classroom assessment under control, maybe we wouldn't need national testing, right? But it's because of the fact that when we look at a grade, we don't really know what that grade means. I mean, even within a building, you can have from building to building, a teacher down the hall grading completely differently than another teacher. In my district and districts around me, some teachers are allowed to choose their own grading scale, even for the same course. So for one teacher teaching Algebra 1, a 93 could be an A. For another, a 93 could be a B. And when we allow ridiculous policies like this, of course we need something to fix it, which is where a lot of these No Child Left Behind things happen. We don't have a common unit of measurement. I mean, we know what happened with the Hubble, right? With only 2 units of measurement, the English or the metric system, we messed up the Hubble. We set up, oh, well, of course they'd be using inches, right? Doesn't everybody use it? You didn't! We were shocked. And so then we had to go up and fix it. That's only with 2 units of measurement. We have infinite units of measurement in here, where we decide what it is that you're going to be assessing and what that looks like. There is no standard. So of course it doesn't work. This leads to unfailable classes, right? Don't you just push the kids on? Because we can't do it, so we'll do whatever we can just to make them move on. In fact, I've had administrators who said to me, is them not understanding this math content, is that worth them being retained for? Would you like to rethink that grade? Well, my favorite was my first year teaching when a principal forced me to change a grade because if I didn't, the parent was going to sue the district for discrimination. Because the kid had math. Yeah, I'm not doing that again. I'm not changing grades. And I think a lot of this boils down to this revolutionary attitude, which is funny because I'm simultaneously trying to stir up revolution in us, but say it's bad at the same time, which is odd. But we all feel like you can't tell me what to do, right? Isn't it the natural human course that, in fact, I did this in one workshop. I said, put up your hand. And so you put up your hand and then you go up and you press against the hand. What's your natural response? You press back, right? And that's how we're wired. When somebody says, well, you need to do it this way, you go, no, I'm closing my door and I'll do what I want, right? This is my room, you can't tell me. And I think we're going to have to get past that attitude and instead move into an attitude of, okay, how can I change to benefit the student? Okay. I have some ideas of what we could change to, but I don't think that they're necessarily the best. And I'm willing to hear other positions, and I'm willing to change if people are. And we're going to have to do that to move out of this testing practice. So imagine what if we had a universal grading system. Sort of like a universal plugins, like, right down here from power plug. Can you imagine if every company got to put out their own power plug? Or what if, how many do you have TVs mounted on your wall? Anybody TVs mounted on your wall? That uses the VESA system, V-E-S-A, okay, which measures everything by the same thing. So that way you can buy a wall mount and it will fit any TV. What if TV companies could decide wherever they wanted to put the screws and then you had to buy your specific mount? Or USB keys, right? Universal systems are good. And I think a universal system of grading, not exact individual practices, but a universal grading system, philosophy, backing up the big idea, not the nuts and bolts, but the big idea, could allow for the total elimination of high-stakes testing. We're never going to take a subjective task and make it completely objective, but we can voluntarily narrow that gap. So what are you going to do for this thing, to tackle classroom assessments? Here's what I'd ask you to do. Please, on your own, go out and research what are the best practices in assessment. Okay, just Google it. See what articles come up and start reading it, figuring it out. I think you'll see that a lot of things that we typically do in the classroom don't actually make sense and aren't supported by research. So research it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Go out. You're a professional. And you know what you're talking about. So go and look and see. And then once you do that, what if we developed a unified vision and philosophy? What if you started with your school or your school district and said, okay, can we do this? As a school district, can we get unified behind this idea? And then you contacted your ROE and you said, hey, you know what, ROE, can you house a meeting for us and these other school districts? Because we'd like to get these school districts together and build something else. And then once we hit that, what if you came back to us here at ICTM and said, hey, ICTM, can you house something for us to get together and talk about this so we can get something going for the whole state? I mean, we can build it from the ground up, but we've got to be doing the legwork to make that happen. If I asked you these questions right now, would we all agree? What should a grade tell us? In other words, what needs to be reported on a report card? Or what does conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and application look like, which are awesome aspects of Common Core? Or how do we even report this stuff? What should it even look like on a report card? We're not even having those discussions, I don't think. And not that we're all going to agree, but we could build consensus. We could. I believe in the teachers of Illinois more than I believe in the politicians. Okay? And I think that we can get together and make something work. But to be able to get classroom assessment under control, we need a couple other pieces of the puzzle. Because unfortunately, this whole thing ties together. My dad once told me over lunch, I eat lunch with my dad every week so he can see his grandkids, and because I like to hang out with my dad too. But he said one time, he said, Eric, is there anything you think you're doing right in education? I said, well, no, not really. So I think this is a holistic change, and another piece of that is national open source curriculum. Because we know the way we currently run textbook systems is it pushes further inequity based on monetary resources. So in other words, if you can afford the flash and bang, you get the flash and bang. But if you don't, you're stuck with duct tape and 1982 textbooks, right? Or 64 is the case may be, whichever it is. Okay? And at this point, even as we develop new textbooks and they claim to be Common Core aligned, now they're charging yearly subscription fees on top of the regular textbook fees, right? So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, our nation of children, which by the way, we just hit a mile marker, right? Over 50% of our nation's students are now in poverty, first time in U.S. history. And so now that our students are poorer and poorer, we're charging more and more money. The way my dad says to fix this, well, he became a lawyer. That's how he fixed it. He said, it's better to be a have than a have-not. Because the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. And I don't quite have that belief of a look yet. Because I think that if we defy the system and we work against it, we can eliminate these inequities. Also, have you found that your textbook shackles the way that you teach? For example, think of dilations. There are textbooks out there that say, for dilation on a coordinate plane, you have to find x prime when you take k times x. Well, that only works if your center of dilation is the origin. And we know that on the PARCC test, they're going to have other centers of dilation. So now you have nothing in your curriculum that will actually help you with that, right, if you're going with that textbook. So the textbook, whether we like it or not, is affecting instruction, because there's all this talk about, well, the curriculum and the standards are different and the instruction is different, but baloney, they're all tied together. They're a unified group. And also, we're increasing inconsistencies in assessments. Look at all your options in the back of your textbook. You know, where you have test form A, test form B, performance task A, multiple choice test. We're just letting, choose your favorite. Talk about inconsistent. You know, if this teacher gives a multiple choice and the kid guesses all right, this person gives a performance task and this one gives a short answer, are those really comparable? No, because they're not giving us the validity and reliability that we need. Furthermore, this is outside of teacher control. Why on earth would we say, you know what, the teachers have to do this thing. They got to teach. They got to do instruction. They're the ones who really know what's going on. Let's have somebody else write the. That doesn't make sense. We're the ones who are down in the trenches. We're the ones who are working with students, and we need to have the ability to work with people. You know, Bill Gates and Pearson right now are basically in control of the content. And even if we find problems that don't work or we need to fix or revise, we don't have control to do that. Even if it's just a typo, we can't even fix a typo. Every year we got to mark it in the book. Oh yeah, I forgot this problem doesn't work. You know. So instead, if we had open source curriculum that's freely available, all you have to do is download it. Every student, outside of socioeconomic differences, because they have to have the technology to be able to download it, ideally, every school district at least has one computer at this point. I'm not sure that that's true. You may laugh, but I'm not sure that every school district has at least one computer. But if they did, they could download it, print it off themselves, and if they wanted to get fancy, fine, print it in color. You know, if you got the money to do it, go ahead, make sure. You know, every student would have equal access. Okay. Teachers would have the opportunity to choose the activities that fit best. I've already had some people who came up to me and said, we want a place to have input in this curriculum, because they're looking at ISBE curriculum models. And where can we get input to put changes out there? I would love it if ICTM would house that for you, where you could say, okay, well, we'll meet this standard, and we could throw up some activities online that would meet these standards and assess those standards. And then you could go, okay, what's going to work best for my students? Consistent assessment policies would then be able to flourish because we would have a consistent curriculum. And we would have the opportunity to give continual updates and improvements and revisions as we need. Okay? So what do you need to do as an action step for this piece of it? Find the resources that are freely available. One is the ISBE Math curriculum models. I mean, I worked on that committee for the first 2 years of this project. It's in the third year right now. I've told ISBE this, and I continue to tell them this. It is the most important work that they've ever done for the state. I really believe that. Because they're trying to get materials in your hands that are really going to work, that meet Common Core, and they're trying to do it for free. Okay? I think it's the most amazing thing that's out there. But even that, I would call only a rough draft. I mean, for the people who are on the committee or were there with me, the whip is right cracking behind us. You know, get this done, got to get this done, because we got to show the state that what we're doing is worthwhile. So a lot of this is only rough draft material that you're going to have to take and tweak on your own, and it's still not done. It's a work in progress. And hopefully it never will be done. Hopefully ISBE will continue to work with that. Engage New York is another one. There are lots of others out there. So find those things, vet them, check them out, and develop some on your own, and then share those things. Anything that you find or anything that you create, share it. Share it freely with other people. And please don't do teachers pay teachers. Again, this is one of those things that doesn't make sense. Okay? Teachers pay teachers. Okay, teachers don't make any money. What will I do? I'll charge teachers more money. If we care about the kids, share it for free. Put it out there. Okay? I co-wrote 2 textbooks now for Common Core at the 8th grade level. One is just the regular 8th grade standards, and the other is Algebra 1. That's the accelerated sequence in Appendix A of Common Core. Okay? Everything is up on our website. We have video lessons up on our website, and I give it away for free. I have people using it in Spain, people in India using it, people around the nation. I just got an email from Michigan this morning. People all over the world are using this. In fact, there's one in Hawaii. I'm trying to get them to fly me out for a PhD session. I don't think it's going to happen. But because it's free, people are going, yes, thank you for the help. And that's what we need to be about. Just like we're helping the students, we should be helping each other, not charging each other. right? Help, help. That's our goal. And the third thing I would say is recommend that your school does not buy textbooks anymore. Textbooks are part of the institution of education that I don't really think serve a valid purpose anymore other than a repository for homework problems. That's basically what you use your textbook for, right? So if that's all you use your textbook for, why are we arguing over which textbook company is the best? Other than to save us time from writing homework. And it does take a while, I know. It took us, a year and a half to write a textbook full of homework problems. And then the last piece is we need no more standards. No more standards. Because any set of standards hurts students because it's a one-size-fits-all. If you demand that every student meet up to this, it will never happen. Never. And nor should it. Now, be careful. I'm not saying get rid of Common Core. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying standards in general don't work. The whole premise of standards. Think about it. Even hyper-local standards. Even if you could design your own standards for your classroom and say, these are my standards, not every kid would hit it. Right? Even within one classroom, you would not have every child who hits those standards. And that's because each kid has their own needs. Each student has their own set of circumstances that they need help with. In fact, my assistant superintendent says every student needs an IEP. Every student needs an IEP. And I would agree with that if we did IEPs right. Of course, in our nation, what an IEP means is that it looks the same. In fact, you can be audited if you have too many students with IEPs who are not in the regular ed classroom. So in other words, we're saying you can have individualized education as long as it's the same as everybody else. Right? We defined everything backwards. Least restrictive environment is where you get the least help instead of where you get the most help. That's not least restrictive. We want to eliminate barriers to learning. In fact, the testimony that was given before Congress for this No Child Left Behind rewrite just about a month ago at this point, 3 weeks ago maybe, there's a high school teacher from New York who said that the high schoolers that come into his high school range from anywhere from the 2nd to 3rd grade levels to some of the best in the country. If you have a 2nd or 3rd grade level student to the best in the country, do you think they're all going to meet the same standard at the same time? Unrealistic. And not helpful for students. Furthermore, what standards make us do is, again, push kids ahead. Because if you're in the 7th grade, you learn this thing, right? If you're in the 8th grade, this is what you do. You're cooked by batches. It's, as Ken Robinson put it, it is your manufacture date that makes the most difference in education. Oh, this student was manufactured in 2019. There we go. You're done. 18 years, you're done cooking. When that's not true. They need more help, and some students need less help. It depends on the circumstances of the student. And again, we get these unfailable classes where we pretend students understand just so they can graduate, because we know statistically speaking that retention doesn't work, that retention is not useful for students. And we also know that if they don't graduate from high school, their chances of making money are way worse. So aren't we better off by helping the kid by just faking it and pretending like they get it? And I think that's typically what we do as a whole, as a nation. And even the students know that they don't understand. The students are aware that they don't get it. And then what happens is they know they don't get it, they know that we're faking it, and then they get turned off more and more to mathematics. And that's the opposite of what we want. We want them to see the value and the beauty and the use of mathematics. We don't want them to say, oh, I don't get it now, I'm never going to get it, which is, again, statistically what happens when we push kids cognitively beyond what they're ready for. I heard it said this way, it's a good goal to try and get an infant prepared for a marathon. It's a noble goal to raise those standards. But, no. And we're doing the same thing in math ed. We also have the lack of time to master content. Common Core standards said fewer, higher, clearer. And I'm here to tell you, I teach more topics faster than I did under the old system. In fact, right now I talk all day about teaching systems of equations. I'm teaching, in particular, systems of equations now, which I only used to teach to accelerated students. Now I'm teaching it in less time to my regular ed students. In fact, Marzano, if you know any of Marzano's work in standard-based grading, he estimated that to teach our standards it would take up to 71% more time, which is 9 more years 9 more years of education to teach what we are currently teaching. And that would be only to get most of the kids to understand it. Not even all. It would take 9 more years. So the only way we're going to be able to implement this national assessment that makes sense, classroom assessments that make sense, is to have the time to teach that. And too much of the content that we teach right now is just not useful to the average American. We just don't need it. No one has asked the question whether or not we should be teaching the quadratic formula. We're only asking when we should teach it. No one is asking whether or not we should be teaching systems of equations, only when. And I think we need to have that discussion. Because at this point, especially with the way technology is progressing, yes, we need STEM. We need STEM standards. We need people who can tackle that. Right? But for most of these issues that are out there, there's already something available that will help us get past those things. The technology already exists where we don't need that anymore. We have calculators now, handheld calculators that will do calculus for you. Right? You don't need to know anything. You need to know how to punch it in. And there's a difference in the way education fits. And that's because we're still stuck in a model that was designed over 100 years ago. And also, I've heard this, college and career ready, those don't go together. I don't know if you noticed that. Being college ready has almost nothing to do with being career ready. They're completely different. Okay? What career my grandpa was a farmer. Quadratic formula going to help him with that? That's career ready? No, I don't think so. And not only that, think about the difference between within a college. Which college are we talking about? Which college ready? Which college ready do we mean? Because even I saw the video that one of the Common Core authors was getting grilled over something, and he said, "Well, yeah, this wouldn't be quite good enough to get into Harvard or something like that." And I'm glad he admitted that because it's true. Different colleges have different expectations, and that's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But there is no one-size-fits-all, even for the colleges. And think about careers: electrician versus politician versus programmer versus lawyer. All these people have different needs mathematically. And instead, we're saying, well, we're just going to throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. And hopefully it'll work for you. Good luck with that. We're not teaching the whole child. And I think we need to go back to teaching the whole child. I had a college roommate who was kicked out of 2 different colleges because academically he couldn't keep up with the work. But yet one of the colleges that kicked him out hired him as a programmer. And he did a good job. Another college roommate that I had was in the computer science department, and he had a guest lecturer come in from, I don't remember if he was from Apple, he was at least from Silicon Valley. But came in and they said, look, if you want to be hired in Silicon Valley as a programmer, stop doing all this college stuff. Don't do your homework. Don't go to class. Use the time to actually program and show us that you know how to program. Like the guy who made the Kinect. Which system is Kinect for? Xbox. There we go. Okay. So the guy who worked on the Kinect. Thank you. He was just designing cool stuff that you could do with the Wii, and so he hacked into a Wii and saw all these different things that you could do, and then Microsoft said, "Whoa, that guy knows what he's doing. We don't care what degree he's got. Let's go." And they brought him in and they made the Kinect. These are different issues for different kids. The sheer volume of knowledge that we have at this point basically means you can't be a jack of all trades anymore, right? You can't. There's too much knowledge. Okay, so what would national benchmarks do? So what if we took Common Core standards and we said, okay, here they are. Instead of calling them standards, what if we call them benchmarks? We said, okay, here's the benchmark. And then we could say, here's what level you're at. What this would do is this would allow for mastery learning, where students could grow at their own pace. And you could say, here's what level they have achieved. By the time they get into high school, you would have some students who have achieved here, some students who have achieved here, but their achievement would be different in different subject areas, and that would be okay. Instead of being identified as gifted in 4th grade, then you're gifted in every subject for the whole rest of your life, or instead of being identified with a learning disability in 3rd grade, and then you're stuck in that program for the rest of your life. Instead, you have fluidity, and you can move based on your need. In fact, mastery learning is not this new idea. It was actually one of the first times it was implemented was right here in Illinois. It was called the Winnetka Plan in 1922. 1922. And it was successful at that point. And the way that they did it is they took the philosophy that time is the variable, not learning. so that everybody is going to learn and achieve, but the time that it takes to do that may be different. And for some students, the time that it would take to learn something might be prohibitive. And that's okay. Everybody's different. Everybody's unique, just like everybody else. Oh, okay. That was a joke. Good morning. Thank you. Appreciate that. So, mastery learning. In my mind, it is what does the student need and how can we get them there? And they can still move on with their age-appropriate peers. They can still, graduate to the next level, but they're working on content that is designed for them. And with the advent of technology today, things like the Khan Academy, which I think are still probably a little too procedural at this point, but we're getting there. With things like that, we can actually provide individualized education for each student. And I want to say, just because people say, well, this is tracking. No, this is not tracking. And even if it were, I'm okay with that. I don't think tracking is an evil word. I think tracking is an evil word when it's used to keep people down. And it's to say you're stuck here. But if there's fluidity, there's not. And by the way, did you know that tracking actually did work? They finally had a chance in Kenya. They tested it. Where they randomly were able to distribute the students in 120 schools. 60 of them they had tracking, and 61 of them, I believe, they did not. And this was from December 2009 in a magazine called Education Next. And the tracking students far outperformed non-track. Okay? Now, tracking is not about separating and labeling. Or at least mastery learning is not. I think tracking probably isn't as bad. But mastery learning would be about what do you need and how can we get you there at the time that you need it. Okay? And there would be no threat of failure hanging over the students then. Students would have motivation to keep trying. Because at this point, have you ever had a student who after first quarter was sunk? They had no chance making it through second quarter? Yeah. So at this point, there's no threat of failure hanging over them. Instead, we have consistent assessment, and we have consistent curriculum for all students to be able to access. We would also be able to reevaluate what we should be teaching. We already talked about that. Does every student need to solve operations with scientific notation, perform transformations on the coordinate plane? But this would take, again, years of research. And we need to eliminate this, what is it called, the Lake Wobegon effect? Is that the name of it? Where everybody is above average? In our state, the state average is this, and we're all above average. What? Yeah, that doesn't mathematically make sense. We're never going to get everybody above average by definition. But what we can do is help each individual student reach their individual unique potential and continue to push them and not hold them back. Give them the opportunity to learn and not the mandate. So what do? Again, yell at people. Okay? Contact politicians. You've got to write a letter. This is what I'm saying. Fighting's hard. What you have to do is you've got to write a letter. Please go home and write a letter. Write a letter to your, not only the politicians, but write it to your superintendents. And I'm not saying pull Common Core, because good grief, we end up with Common Core again. Right? It'd just be labeled something different, like the Sunshine Standards. Okay? Or, in our case, it's the new Illinois Learning Standards. We're not Common Core. And create mastery learning opportunities at the local level. Generally speaking, the K-3 teachers have this down. So if you need help with that, ask your elementary school teachers, because they do a pretty good job with that. My student right now is doing subtraction while everybody else is doing addition in kindergarten. Okay? And that's called Math Flex. It's not tracking. Right? So we know how to differentiate. We can reevaluate your assessment and retention policies. Go back and have this talk with your districts. What can we do about assessment? Do we really need to retain kids for this? What is important for the child? What does it mean? Because if you retain a student in a grade level, could they move on with their age-appropriate peers but just have grade level content that is filtered for them? And then would that work better for them? Redefine what retention can mean. And provide opportunities for remediation, probably by volunteering your time. And here's one of the other things that's hard to do. Donate more time for free. Go out and work. I'm trying to start a program in my district right now. We've tried to meet with our assistant superintendent. We haven't had a chance. But we're going to try and set up a summer workshop, RTI workshop for kids that we're just planning on just doing for free. Because we just want the kids to grow and get better. And we're going to have more teachers that are willing to do that. Instead of teachers that say, well, I better increase my pay on that contract if I'm going to do that. Right? We're never going to be paid well, folks. Okay? They're not going to give us the money that we probably deserve in some cases, and I'm okay with that because we make a living, right? And so donate time if you can. So, can this happen? Will this happen? Yes, I think it can, but we all have to build consensus and we all have to work together. What can ICTM do to help you? That's one of my big questions. I really want ICTM to become an agent of positive change. I want ICTM as an organization to take a stand on some issues. But we need to hear from you. Okay? So, and remember, this is Eric Wright talking, not board member ICTM necessarily pushing board policy. Okay? I'm asking you as a fellow teacher, tell us what we can do to help. Tell ICTM as an organization what can we do to help you in the classroom. And ICTM will get behind you. Okay? Ask yourself, what can your department do? What can your district do? And look, look at that being beloved of Jerusalem was supposed to come up later, but oh well. We live in a climate that's ready for revolution. Okay? And this is it. Did you know that 40 Illinois superintendents sent a letter trying to delay PARC? Not get rid of it, which I think is wise. Not get rid of it, just to delay it because we're not ready. Here's what they said. 42 superintendents signed this in Illinois. They said, we believe that the PARC testing initiative has moved too fast, is ill-planned, does not support the basic tenets of quality formative assessment, such as validity and reliability, is consuming vast and valuable resources, both human and monetary, at the district level, and most importantly, will not truly benefit our students. Okay? Another superintendent from Illinois, from Argo Community High School, said, absent some quick response from ISBE about delaying PARC, I will join my colleagues in Chicago and recommend to my Board of Education that we refuse to subject our students to PARC. We'll use those hours to teach and learn instead. And not only does this climate of revolution start here, but it's even moving up. You know, CPS defied ISBE by saying we're not going to get PARC, and then ISBE says we're going to sanction you, but then ISBE defies the U.S. Department of Education saying we're not going to give you science tests, please don't sanction us. Okay? So this revolution is coming all over the place. So the climate is right. The climate is right for change. And a revolution can happen. So here's what I want to leave you with. Each and every one of you, whether you know it or not, makes a difference in tons of kids' lives. Every year, you're the people who are on the ground, boots on the ground, making a difference for those kids. And your voice matters to me. What you say and what you believe as a professional matters to me. And it's going to matter to everybody else if we can join together with one voice. If we can get together and say, here's where we need to head for the sake of the students. And we've got to be willing to get rid of the things that we hold dear for the better of the students. To make things better for them and help them learn more. Thanks for coming today. Appreciate it. Dr. Becker has something to say.
You know, I would like to have Eric back here for our conference to give talks. He knows a lot. He does himself very well. Very thinking about important issues. So, Eric, thanks a lot for coming back. And I want to remind you, we want to remind you to fill out those forms that are in your